Yeah, it does have a few, but it'll be more houses. It was where someone I know, it was their house in last year was on the end of their road. That road was, so
Right.
there'll be quite a lot of students living there. So I'm not saying it is, but it will be like maybe people walking home. I'm not 100% sure.
Milton Street, this is the place on which a van tried to run down 3 individuals. We understand that they are all in hospital. Are you familiar with Milton Street?
I'm familiar with the sort of area. Yeah, I know, as I said before, I know Nottingham is a very student area, but when the police van, I can literally, if I open my window now, I can see the van that the attacker was in. And when the armed police were here, straight away they got a thing on the radio saying that they need to head back to Milton Street. So I don't know exactly what happened there. It seemed like it was very severe.
You're with GB News Live. I'm Tom Harwood, and here's what's coming up. 3 people dead and a 31-year-old man arrested on suspicion of murder in Nottingham in what's been described by police as a horrific and tragic incident. Police say they were called to Ilkeston Road in the city at 4 a.m. this morning, where 2 people were found dead. They also said there was another incident where a van attempted to run over 3 more people. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has said on Twitter that he's being updated on developments, adding the police must be given the time to undertake their work. We'll bring you the very latest from the scene and any developments over the next 3 hours. But first, here's Tatiana with your very latest news headlines.
Tom, thank you very much and good afternoon. Some breaking news as you've been hearing. Our main story on GB News this afternoon. 3 people have been killed in a series of incidents in Nottingham. Police say 2 bodies were found in the early hours of the morning. They were then called to another incident where a van was used to run down 3 people. A 31-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder. Nottinghamshire Police believes the separate incidents are all linked. Kane Brady, who lives in the area, told us he saw an arrest being made.
Woke up to shouts of armed police, and what I said earlier sounded like some very loud commotion, sounded like gunshots. Honestly, it was that loud. We looked out the bedroom window and I saw tasers. I saw a man being dragged out, pinned to the floor. I saw him getting arrested. He was trying to resist. I then later saw, when they opened the van, I saw a large knife being pulled out. And then straight away, that's when the police then closed off both roads, both Maple Street and Bentinck Road.
Well, here's what we know so far. Just after 4 o'clock this morning, police were called to Ilkeston Road, where the bodies of 2 people were found. They then attended another incident on Milton Street following reports the driver in a van had tried to run over 3 people. They're now being treated in hospital. Another victim, a man, was later found dead in Magdala Road. Well, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has posted on social media saying, "I want to thank the police and emergency services for their ongoing response to the shocking incident in Nottingham this morning." He says, "I'm being kept updated on developments. The police must be given the time to undertake their work." He says, "My thoughts are with those injured and the family and loved ones of those who have lost their lives." Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has also paid tribute while addressing the London Tech Week conference a short while ago.
People here will probably be seeing the news filtering through, and I don't think we can start this session without acknowledging that there has been a serious incident in Nottingham this morning. Information is still coming through, but it's just been reported that 3 people have lost their lives. So I'm sure I speak for everybody in this room in saying that we'd like to just send our thoughts to all those affected, and to the emergency services who are responding to this as we speak. So I think we will get to tech, obviously, in just a moment, but I just think when there's something that serious happening in Nottingham, we just need to acknowledge it. As I say, send our thoughts to those that are affected and thank those that are responding to it on behalf of all of us.
This is GB News. We'll, of course, bring you all of the latest developments from Nottingham. Now, though, it's back to Tom.
Well, as we've been hearing, a 31-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after 2 people were found dead in the street in Ilkeston Road in Nottingham just after 4 a.m. this morning, and a 3rd man was then also found dead in Magdala Road. Another 3 people are in hospital after someone tried to run them over with a van in Milton Street in what police believe is a connected incident. Let's cross live now to Nottingham and speak with GB News East Midlands reporter Will Hollis. And Will, what are you learning on the ground there?
Yes, well, Tom, the thing that hits you when you arrive here in Nottingham is just the scale of what's happened here today. There are a number of locations that you were just speaking about where police still have active police cordons. There are media everywhere, as well as lots of people stopping and trying to figure out what's happened here. I think the thing that's really hitting people in Nottingham today is the shock at how widespread this is. You were just talking about Milton Street, one of the locations where a van is believed to have run into 3 people who are still in hospital. That's just one location where I am right now. If you went around half a mile up the road, you'd find yourself at Ilkeston Road, where police have said that they found 2 people dead in the street. If you walked a little bit from there, you'd find yourself in Magdala Road, where another person was found dead in the streets. And it really is affecting people here in Nottingham today, whether it's emotionally affecting how they're feeling about their city that they know and love, or if it's just affecting their day because the scale of the disruption is so significant. Nottingham is a bustling metropolitan city. People come from all over the Midlands, from places like Leicester, Derby, as well as smaller towns on the outskirts of Nottinghamshire. The disruption is significant for places like East Midlands Railway, as well as not NET, the people that run the trams here in Nottingham. They say that they've they've stopped all services today in and out of the city. Nottingham City Transport, which runs the buses, they're diverting their buses throughout the city, and all of 3 of those transport organisations are sharing tickets so that if you can't get on one form of transport, you can get on another. But disruption to your travel is just a small insignificance paled with what's happened here today. I'm just going to move out the way a little bit, Tom, so you can just have a little bit of a look. This street would usually be full of buses taking people into the city or outside of it. You can probably see in the background a little bit that there's a McDonald's and a Taco Bell right now at around lunchtime. Usually those places would be full of people that were getting their lunch. Now instead the street is filled with 2 police cars. In relation to this, something quite bizarre happened a little bit ago, Tom, actually. We're talking about a triple murder, a man being charged, a 31-year-old man, with this particular incident. But you can see that there's a massive police cordon. Maybe about an hour ago, somebody actually tried to run into the police cordon over near McDonald's. They were chased down by police officers, including armed police officers, tackled and held there for about 10 minutes before being taken away. So while this is a really sensitive area, while there's lots of people that are trying to figure out how they can go about their day, there are actually people that are trying to get in and out of this cordon and being chased down police, even though it's something that's really quite a significant police operation.
Will, can you tell us any more about this individual who tried to breach the cordon in the last few minutes? We've got some footage for those watching on television now where we can see what looks like police restraining this individual just outside the McDonald's there, a little bit further down the road. How old was this individual? What can you assume their motivation was to breach this cordon?
Yes, well, one of the things that I can hear behind me from the police officer that's on the cordon is having lots of conversations with people that are a little bit frustrated or a little bit concerned or confused as about how they can get around their day. But none of them have run inside of the police cordon. We can only speculate as to why somebody would want to really run into an active police cordon that's relating to an investigation of 3 people that have been murdered in the city. What it looked like was it looked like it could have been a man. From the video that I saw, it was quite blurry. It was only phone video that I managed to get, but it looked like a man maybe in their 20s or 30s being taken away by police. I couldn't tell you if they arrested him as such. It certainly appeared that way, but I haven't had that confirmed. But it appeared that they took him to the police van and then drove away. And I imagine maybe they're questioning him right now.
Well, Will, thank you very much for the very latest there in what's happening on the ground in Nottingham. We'll be back with you, of course, throughout the show as we learn more about what has happened this morning. But it's not just what's going on the ground. There have been lots of political responses in response to this incident as well. Let's cross over to GB News political editor Darren McCaffrey, who is in Westminster for us. And Darren, we've heard a lot from a number of senior politicians. Right, I think we're struggling to establish some audio connection with Darren. We'll try to get back with him as soon as we can. But just to recap, the incident we assume took place at around 4 a.m. this morning. I believe we've got Darren now in Westminster for us.
Tom.
Darren, yes, there we go. We can hear your dulcet Northern Irish tones. Darren, what has been the political response?
Yeah, indeed, as I was saying, it's unsurprising the fact that we've got a pretty strong political response given the seriousness of this incident and also how infrequent, thankfully, these incidents here are in the UK. The Prime Minister tweeted out within the last couple of hours that he wanted to thank the police and the emergency services for their ongoing response. What he branded a shocking incident, and saying that he's been kept up to date with developments, but the police must be given time to undertake their work. I think, again, trying to dissuade people from necessarily trying to speculate or jump to conclusions about what the motivations might have been behind this attack. The Home Secretary, who's also, we're told, in contact with the Chief Constable of Nottinghamshire Police and also is receiving regular updates, said that she was shocked and saddened that 3 people have lost their lives in Nottingham. My thoughts are with those affected by this incident. And Keir Starmer, leader of the opposition, said that he thought his thoughts were with the family and friends of those who've lost their lives, those injured, and the people of Nottingham. Again, thanking the police and branding it an awful incident. And also, interestingly, Tom, we've heard from 3 MPs, the 3 MPs who represent the different constituencies in Nottingham today, issuing a joint statement. Pretty rare in politics these days, but they did issue a statement which they said that our city has been devastated by the deaths of 3 people this morning. Our thoughts and prayers are with the families and loved ones of those who have died and those that have injured. We're grateful for the efforts of the city's emergency responders in tackling these incidents. They must be allowed to do their jobs in investigating them. Nottingham is a brilliant city, home to brilliant people from all backgrounds. We're shaken by today's events, but we'll meet them collectively as a community and heal together. So that's a sense of the political mood here at Westminster. Clearly, there will always be concerns about what the motivation behind this attack may well be. It is one of the reasons people like the Home Secretary are constantly kept involved, particularly when it is a major incident like this. But politically, a reflection clearly of the sadness of the people who've lost their lives and a desire, if you like, to thank the police for their ongoing work, but that constant message that police must be given the time and space to carry out their investigations.
And it does seem that with regard to the political response, there is a broad consensus. Perhaps the House seems more united today than it has in recent weeks. There's no politician that's trying to sort of make political capital out of this or engage in wild speculation. All of these politicians from both sides of the House are saying, really, let the police get on and do their job.
Yeah, indeed, and we've often found that, haven't we, in the past when there have been incidents like this, or that have had different motivations that politicians have come together, that, you know, clearly when we've seen the tragedy, frankly, in Nottingham today, there will be a sense across the House of Commons that people should reflect on what has happened, that they should allow the police to investigate what has gone on. But in the end, as you say, this is not a day for politics. We started today talking, didn't we, about the spat between Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak. I mean, that was what people waking up this morning were hearing as the top stories and the front pages of the newspapers, on the radios, on TV. Incidents like this do tend to put those situations, pale them in comparison to what has gone on in Nottingham today. And I suspect that politics, as you say, will take somewhat of a back seat here at Westminster as people work out what has gone on and they offer their condolences to those who've lost their lives.
Well, Darren, thank you very much for bringing us the very latest there from Westminster. More with you later in the programme as we learn more from what these politicians are saying. Let's cross now just to a live picture, or some live pictures we're getting in from Nottingham. This is one of the scenes of Magdala Road, where one individual was sadly found dead this morning. We can see the police have erected a cordon there, and for those listening on the radio, they have erected a sheet as well over what looks like the side of the pavement there. And I don't want to speculate, but it does seem like this is the sort of size and scope of sheet that could be covering a body. We can also see a police van in this picture. Really quite harrowing scenes, given how tranquil and the rest of the scene is. The trees just blowing there in the wind and the sunshine falling down there upon the road and the pavement. But live scenes there of Magdala Road in Nottingham, where one individual was found dead this morning. That's the site to the north of Nottingham. Of course, there are two more roads where we are looking at where police cordons have been erected as well. Well, let's speak now with Simon Harding, the former senior investigating officer at the Metropolitan Police. Simon, thank you for joining us this afternoon. First of all, what will the police now be doing? How does one begin an investigation into an event like this, particularly in the case of this incident where the police appear to have a suspect in custody?
Yeah, well, the most important thing is that they have that suspect in custody. But you look at the time frame, which is now sort of emerging from the original calls around 4 o'clock in the morning to the time of arrest, which looks to be after 5 o'clock. So, you know, you have multiple scenes here to deal with. So the one thing they want to do is make sure they have everything secure. So the crime scenes themselves, that you would call them, the incidents in the 3 roads that we know about, and also the suspect's home address, and potentially anywhere else that he's been in between time, which now could be quite a timeline of disappearance almost between that time. So they'll be wanting to make sure those are all secure, to make sure they get their forensic retrieval as much as best as possible. They'll be trying to identify witnesses, CCTV. There's going to be a lot of CCTV around, even though it was very early in the morning. You know, there is a multitude of CCTV on private businesses, on private dwellings, council cameras. So there's a huge amount of retrieval, but they have that suspect in custody now, which is a very important thing to prevent any further incidents from taking place.
Hugely important, of course, but what would be the timescale of an investigation like this? When might we get some sort of indication with regard to what has happened here, beyond the very basic facts that we have been provided with this morning?
Well, it's an important thing that the officers in charge of the investigation now have everything they need. One of the main things you want to do is make sure that you get to the families of those that have been either injured or unfortunately killed in this incident, because, you know, they shouldn't be learning about too much before they have been told stuff themselves, and there is a supportive network wrapped around them. And also they need to understand what has happened, potentially what a motive is. And obviously people have talked about the possibility of counter-terrorism. It doesn't seem to be going down that path at all now, really. So they want to understand everything before they put out any sort of snippets of what they think might have happened. It has to be very, very factual in a case like this, because it is a huge area. It's going to have an enormous impact on the community, especially the student population who live very local to there as well. So they've got to get it right, and they shouldn't be rushed to do it either. They should do it when they feel it's right and it's necessary. and obviously in respect to all those families of those that have lost people today.
Yes, and I suppose that could take some time, especially if, and again, this is speculation, but if this is a sort of heavily student-populated area, reaching out to the families of those who may be affected, they could be people who aren't local to the area. This could be quite a task for those investigating officers. Have you attended similar incidents to this in the past? Is there a parallel that you can think of in the recent history of this country?
Well, I suppose, yeah, certainly when I worked in counter-terrorism, we had the incidents in Westminster and London Bridge, and those incidents were obviously vast in their nature as well. We've had murder inquiries which have scoped over a significant area within major towns within London. So, yeah, I've been to a few of those, and the important thing is obviously you want to give people reassurance that you know they are doing everything they can, and one of the things they do want to do as well, the police, they will want to try and get everything back to normal as quickly as possible by getting the networks running, the trains and the buses all running again. So, but obviously, you know, you only do that really when you've made that decision that you have everything you need and those areas can be released, if you like, back to the public, so that things can move again. But yes, this is going to take some time, and it takes as long as it takes. It needs to be done. It's very necessary, and you want everything so you don't miss anything. So, you know, realistically, it could take quite a long time, especially for those inner cordons, if you like, where the unfortunately people have been killed.
So when you say it could take quite a long time, we might not be getting more detailed information, perhaps not a police press conference or something similar, maybe until this evening or tomorrow?
Well, I mean, it's so difficult to predict because obviously if you haven't identified the families, for example, of those that have lost ones, and if you haven't necessarily found the address of that person, or you haven't managed to get those things as quickly as you wish, then you have to be, you know, what is the point sometimes of telling people? You just let them get on with their job, let them keep those cordons in place. This is about the families that have lost people now, and it's not about, and I think your reporter said, everything else pales into insignificance when, you know, you're caught up in an incident like this. You know, the police do their work to look after families and members of the public around Nottingham, and that's what they're doing, and they need to get everything they can ready. So when they are ready, you know, certainly an incident like this has gone national and international, then they will want to give information as quickly as possible, but they will only do that when they feel the time is right, and that's what we should see really. Hopefully by this evening you will get some sort of update.
Well, Simon, thank you so much for providing that very important context to what's going through the minds and indeed the plans of those investigating officers, what will actually be happening on the ground, but also the crucial work of reaching out to those families too. Really important information there. Simon Harding, former senior investigating officer at the Metropolitan Police. Thank you for your time. Well, let's get more on this now. Joining me in the studio is the former Metropolitan Police officer, Chris Hobbs. And Chris, just looking at that image that we were seeing on the screen of that cordon that we've most recently seen, police van, 2 forensic officers by the looks of it, and some sort of cover on the ground there. What did you make of that image?
Well, it's disturbing, and of course, what makes this a little bit more unique is the area that it covers. You know, the fact that we've had these attacks and the vehicle trying to run people over. But of course, what almost isn't used now is the volume of knife crime across the country. Now, we don't know the motivation behind this yet. What we do know, and if you're a police officer or in the police community, you do know that these shocking knife attacks, maybe not always ending in murder, but are happening across the country almost on a daily basis. I've never quite known anything like this before. A lot of it involves very young people, teenagers, and I think what we need is an admission that we have a serious problem here. And often, of course, it's clouded by issues like stop and search, for example. You know, people object to stop and search. Some people want it scrapped altogether. I think there needs to be acknowledgement amongst communities, amongst law enforcement, amongst politicians. We have a knife crime / violent crisis in this country. And these scenes are only too familiar to police officers on the front line. Not to this scale, but where they're called to a stabbing where one person's been stabbed and has possibly died doesn't seem to be getting the media attention that when I was a boy, these would be big news. Now it's just, oh, it's another stabbing. The attitude, I think, the mindset needs to change.
Does it matter that this is in Nottingham? Perhaps not the big metropolis that we would normally associate an attack like this. I mean, we've seen attacks in Liverpool and in London in recent months, and perhaps we're more desensitised to a knife attack in London. It seems like something that is just happening so regularly now. But to happen in somewhere like Nottingham, as we've been discussing before on this programme, a student city, not an enormous metropolitan area, what does that say to you?
Well, it reinforces what I've just said. Having said that, Nottingham has its problems. Nottingham does have a gang problem. I'm not sure the Chief Constable would like me saying that, but it has a gang problem. There are issues in Nottingham with knives.
Recently, there's been a gun problem in Nottingham as well.
Yeah.
It had certainly that reputation in recent years, although it doesn't seem like there has been a gun used in this case.
I think the police, well, you've got somewhere like Nottingham, it's perhaps a little bit easier for police to keep on top of the situation, but there are issues in Nottingham. But it's just the scale of this, isn't it? It's the timing, it's the van going up and hitting people, it's the crime or the incidents of crime that are not together, they're scattered. And I think that's what makes it rather alarming and rather bewildering and rather frightening, I think, for the people of Nottingham, which is why, as Simon was saying, as soon as possible it will be good to find out what's happened. But of course, Nottingham police have to make sure they get their facts right before they inform the public of what they know. There's going to be a huge amount of investigation. I suspect Nottingham police officers will be called in on their rest days, Nottingham detectives, everyone. It'll be all hands to the pump in Nottingham at the moment, trying to get to the bottom of what's occurred and reassure the people of Nottingham as well that everything is back under control.
Absolutely, and it's incumbent upon us, I suppose, as well, to not run away with speculation. I know we've seen some things online that have not been confirmed. We've got people trying to confirm all the details that we can and bring them to the viewing public as well. But for now, Chris Hobbs, thank you very much for talking through those issues with us. We can now head over back to Nottingham and speak to GB News reporter, our reporter who is currently outside the arrest site. Jack Carson is there. And Jack, what can you see by the arrest site there?
So, hi, Tob. Yeah, this is on Mount Houghton Road, the junction with Mount Houghton Road and Bentinck Road, just north of the city centre, up the hill from Nottingham city centre. This is where one of the arrests was made this morning. Of course, we know that officers were called to multiple incidents around the city on Ilkeston Road just after 4 a.m, where 2 people were found dead in the street, and then called to another incident in Milton Street where a van had attempted to run over 3 people, which are all currently being treated in hospital. The van here that you can see on the screen, you can see dints on the front, on the bonnet, you can see cracks on the windscreen. It's reported from eyewitnesses that there were gunshots from the police towards the van, and also a taser as well, with a weapon retrieved. No confirmation yet on what exactly that weapon was, but yes, this is the site where one man was arrested this morning. Of course, lots of different stories, lots of information going around. The police, of course, well underway with their investigation. Lots of roads closed off around the city, and of course, it's a city which has lots of tram networks around. All of the trams around me have currently stopped on the road and aren't, of course, being allowed to progress any further. So there's a lot of disruption in the city centre on the public transport networks. The police, of course, are trying to come to terms with what's going on and investigate, of course, that incident. But yeah, here at the arrest site, you can see the van there with smashed glass over the road and cracks in the windscreen.
Jack, just tell us a little bit more about this van. I can see that one of the doors is open. You mentioned those sort of two cracks there down near the base of the windscreen and big dents in the front as well. That suggests some fairly serious collisions.
Yeah, well, of course, we know from the police that a van had attempted to run over 3 people. They're the people that are currently being treated in hospital, and of course that door open, that is where police obviously pulled the driver of that van out during the arrest, when eyewitnesses say they tasered the man in the arrest. So that is the door that was opened by the police, and of course, yes, those cracks suggesting a serious collision with this van, with those those dents, as of course it collided with those people that are being treated in hospital.
And what have you seen on the street this morning? This is presumably a residential area, houses all around. How have the people local to this been coping with a police cordon and such an enormous national story on their doorstep?
Well, it's a big shock, Tom. There's a lot of people going up to the community officers that are here, of course, supporting the police in their investigation here and, of course, keeping that cordon. A lot of people, residents, going up to the police, just asking, some of them that may have been out this morning and, of course, coming back, wondering what, waking up this morning, what on earth has gone on outside their front door on this street. It's a very quiet area. This car's got leafy suburb almost. There's a lot of course, a student population here in Nottingham. A lot of people going up to the police, asking them what has happened, trying to find out any information. Of course, and for a lot of people, it's finding out how they can get around and continue their own days with, of course, lots of road closures in place across the city. Lots of people, of course, not wanting to interrupt those important police investigations, trying to find out from the officers here on the ground how they can, of course, get around those cordons and where they can be diverted so that they can get to where they want to be, and, of course, the police can carry on their work. But, yes, a lot of people shocked this morning that such a major incident has, of course, happened right on their doorstep.
Well, Jack Carson, thank you so much for bringing us the very latest there from the site of the arrest that we know have taken place of the man behind the wheel of that car, of that van, we can presume. Jack Carson there, our reporter on the scene. Well, let's catch up now with the very latest headlines with Tatiana.
Tom, thank you very much and good afternoon. In other news today, the first public hearing in the COVID-19 inquiry is now underway. The initial stage is focusing on whether the country was properly prepared. A solicitor representing the bereaved families for justice says today marks the end of a 2-year battle. A video sharing the experiences of some of those who suffered most during the pandemic was played to the inquiry.
The most you can hope is to give your loved one a good death. And we will forever carry the guilt that our daddy was denied that.
I'm angry. I need questions answered. I'm just still hurt and I'm still upset.
And the time that he needed me most, I wasn't there. And I felt guilty about that, even though it wasn't my fault.
The number of people in work has hit a record high. The jobless rate unexpectedly fell to 3.8% in the 3 months to April. The Office for National Statistics data also shows employment rose past its pre-pandemic level for the first time. Average weekly wages hit a post-COVID record too, but they're still down when taking inflation into account. The victims of a suspected double murder in Stoke-on-Trent have been named by police. 7-year-old Elizabeth John and her 11-year-old brother Ethan were found unresponsive with significant injuries in a home on Sunday. A 49-year-old woman is in custody after being arrested on suspicion of murder. A British man has been detained in South Korea after climbing the world's 5th tallest building. More than 90 emergency service workers were sent to the 1,800-foot-tall Lotwell Tower after a man was spotted scaling the building. George King Thompson was arrested after reaching the 72nd floor. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2569 and 1.1642 euros. The price of gold is £1,563 and 96 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,560 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB Newsers, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in their home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Well, let's recap on that breaking news now that a 31-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after 3 people were found dead in the street in Ilkeston Road in Nottingham and indeed other roads as well just after 4 a.m. this morning. A third man was found on Magdala Road. Another 3 people are in hospital after someone tried to run them over in a van in Milton Street. So that's 3 people confirmed dead and 3 people in hospital in what police believe is a connected incident. Let's cross now to Nottingham and speak with GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White. And Mark, you're at a police cordon there. What can you tell us from what the police have been saying today?
Afternoon, Tom. Yes, we're in Milton Street, right in the city centre of Nottingham. It was this location, we think, round about 4 a.m. this morning, where this white van mounted the pavement, attempted to knock down 4 people. I'm just going to step out of the way and just let the camera get a shot further down the street for you. There's still a lot we don't know in terms of those who were injured, as well as, of course, those who died. We're told that 3 people were injured, are being treated in hospital, but we don't know whether that's because they were actually struck by the van, injured perhaps when they were diving out of the way. That is still to be made clear. Clearly, we've got some interim details from the police. We're expecting a news conference from Nottinghamshire Police later on this afternoon. They've not given us a time for that yet. But just to give you the sort of geography of the area, further down this road, Milton Street, is Ilkeston Road, where 2 people were stabbed to death. And again, about half a mile really on from that is Magdala Road, where another person, a man, was also found dead. And then where the vehicle was finally stopped and the suspect arrested, it's all really within about a mile radius of each other. What we don't know crucially at this time, as well as any potential motive, is the issue around whether this, what the actual time frame, the chronology of these incidents is. Was it the attempt to knock over people first, followed by the stabbings? Did the stabbings happen first, or we just don't know? So again, that's the kind of information that hopefully the police will be able to give us a better idea of when we have this news conference, and also, as I say, an indication of what on earth the motivation for this incident, unfolding as it did about 4 o'clock in the morning, in itself a very unusual time for such a bloody rampage to unfold as well. Normally you would think attacks like this perhaps take place when there are crowded places, when areas are a bit busier. It certainly would have been, even in a university city, would not have been that busy around here at about 4 in the morning when this incident unfolded. So as I say, a lot we still don't know, a lot still to get to know about the alleged attacker who was arrested. We received that exclusive video of that man being detained, having been pulled from the white van that eyewitnesses had seen that was apparently involved in these incidents, pulled from the white van. Another eyewitness told us that he had seen a large knife being recovered from inside that van as well by police once this man was in custody, Tom.
Mark, a large knife, a van with dents on it, and indeed a smashed windscreen, and potentially an hour or even more between when this incident started and when the suspect was apprehended. This is quite a large span of time for these incidents to have taken place in.
Yes, I mean, it's not unusual, though, if you think about the chronology of events like this. Emergency services would be responding in the first instance to either reports of people being knocked down or reports of a stabbing, whichever came first. So they attend that first scene, and as tragic and worrying as that particular episode is, they don't know at that stage that there are linked events. Then, of course, in the minutes ahead, you get other reports of another stabbing, of perhaps the vehicle trying to knock people over at that stage. And it's only after quite a number of minutes that the police controllers and the senior officers will be in their minds now linking these incidents, and that obviously then puts in again another sort of chain of action in terms of, right, where's your suspect, what reports are you getting in? It's maybe that they were told about a white van right away, it's maybe that they weren't told about this van, so it might have been some time before they knew exactly what they were looking for in terms of either a suspect or a suspect vehicle. But of course, an hour and a half later, a suspect is in custody. I don't think that's unusual, really, in fast-paced events like this, where you've got multiple locations and quite a confused picture initially, Tom.
And Mark, you're saying that your understanding, this is not being treated as a terrorist incident, but many people looking at the idea of a van running people over or seemingly random stabbings would say that this does have many of the hallmarks of some of these incidents that we've seen before that have been linked to terror. It looks similar in that way, but it's not being treated as a terror attack.
No, and I mean, I can understand people's frustration when they see broadcasters saying that this is not being treated as a terrorist attack. You know, it looks and has the feel very much of that. I remember back to London Bridge in 2017, I was covering that particular terrorist attack. It was again, a white van that ploughed people over on London Bridge before 3 attackers left that vehicle and then began stabbing people in Borough Market. So you can absolutely see why people, of course, immediately feel that this has all the hallmarks and the feeling of a terrorist attack. However, having said that, as the wind absolutely gusts through this part of Nottingham, having said that, there are potential other explanations. As I say, the time of day seems odd, I think, in terms of, you know, a possible terrorist attack, unless it was someone who was trying perhaps to target clubbers coming out of all night clubs at that point. That is a possibility, but it could also, let's not forget, be linked to criminality, gang culture. This city, like so many inner cities in the UK, has a particular problem with violent crime and gang-related crime as well. So that's one thing. Another is the issue of, you know, someone that perhaps has a disturbed mind and another motivation that we just don't know about at this stage. All I can say is that my sources have said to me that at the moment the evidence that they have to hand doesn't point in the direction of a terrorist investigation. Now that might change in the fullness of time if they get more in the way of information here that suggests that this person is linked to extremism in one way or another. But the information that they have to hand at the moment, and we again caveat, we are still in the early stages of what is still a fast-moving major investigation, but the information they have to hand at the moment is not pointing in the way of a terrorist attack at this stage.
Well, Mark White, thank you so much for the very latest there on the ground. We'll be with you throughout the show, of course, as more information comes to light. But for now, let's turn to Paddy Tipping, who is a former Police and Crime Commissioner. Paddy, thank you for making the time for us this afternoon. It does seem like the most extraordinary story, and we are learning more details all the time. What does it, in your time as a police and crime commissioner, did you see any parallels to what we've seen this morning?
So a decade ago, Nottingham had a reputation for gun crime, for violent crime, but over the past 10 years, things have really improved, and this is a significant and out-of-character event. So people in Nottingham are really concerned about it. The police are very active. They say that the 3 separate incidents are linked, and there'll be further investigations, and I think a press conference later on this afternoon. A big issue at the moment is that the city centre is closed down. Milton Street is right in the centre of Nottingham, and is causing an awful lot of disruption. And of course, people are very concerned and would be keen to know. They're inquiring what really has happened. So as soon as the police can throw more light on the situation, I think that will relieve anxiety.
And in your experience, of course, we can't know for sure, but in your experience, how soon might we see this afternoon that press conference? How soon might, particularly Milton Street in the centre of Nottingham there, be able to be reopened and some sense of normality resume within the city?
So I would think that there would be a press conference before tea time this evening. I think it's quite hard to speculate when all the cordons will be lifted. Forensic workers are on the scene in all 3 locations, and I guess it depends on what they find. And more particularly, I think this is the interesting bit, although the shocking bit, how the 3 separate incidents link together over a relatively short period of time. What the chronology is, and more particularly behind that, what the motives are here. It really is significant and upsetting for people locally.
It does seem highly unusual that there seems to have been a spate of stabbings and a separate spate of van attacks. Presumably, carried out by the same individual, although we don't know that for sure. One suspect has been arrested, of course. In your experience, have you seen assailants switch from one weapon, for want of a better word, to another?
Well, it's unusual, but it's not impossible. I think the significant point is that an arrest has been made and a young man is in custody, and that gives the police plenty of material to work forward from, to try and establish what the motivation is. And as you rightly say, the key question really is how these incidents relate together, how they work together, what the chronology was, and as I said previously, what the motivation is behind it. And as your reporter on the scene has said, this isn't being treated, although it looks like it looks like a terrorist incident. My impression is that this was probably more gang and drug related than being a terrorist event.
Certainly the time of night or day, or however we should describe 4 a.m, would seem to fit more with that assessment. Paddy Tipping, thank you so much for giving your expertise and indeed experience here. Former Police and Crime Commissioner, of course, thank you very much for being with us. Let's turn now to GB News contributor Martin Daubney, who himself grew up in Nottingham and is the vital link in terms of how we exclusively have this remarkable footage of the arrest of the suspect. Martin, just firstly, talk us through how GB News arrived at that footage.
Yeah, can I first say, Tom, just the unimmeasurable sadness and shock that people in Nottingham must be feeling. I mean, I was born in Nottingham, and these sort of things just don't happen there. I've spoken with friends and family today, and they are absolutely chilled to their bone. It's a wonderful, beautiful city, wholly undeserving of such a heinous act. And I just want to pass on my love to everyone there today. Having said that, I was passed this footage by a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, whose son, Kane Brady, is a student at Nottingham University. And in the early hours this morning, on Bentinck Road, this arrest, which now seems to be the perpetrator of this series of crimes, was arrested literally outside his front door. The footage you're seeing now of the van was filmed by Kane. I've been speaking to him throughout the day. It's very clear now that that vehicle is covered in marks and dints and damage, entirely associated with the vehicle being used as some form of battering ram, as is now consistent with the pattern of the crime that we're seeing. But I want to give a bit more insight, if I could, Tom, into the area. I know the area very well. In fact, Magdala Road. I used to live on Redcliffe Road, the road behind Magdala Road, for all of my teenage years. It's an area called Mapley Park that kind of buttresses onto an area called Hyson Green in the back of the forest, an area which really fell into a lot of social malaise due to the ingress of drug gangs and violence. And for a while, Nottingham had the very unenviable name of Shottingham. Gun violence was terrible. There is a lot of hard drugs going on around there, particularly crack, and a lot of gang warfare. Another thing about Mapley Park, I did a dissertation where I looked at Nottingham's mental health facilities, and there's quite a cluster in that area for patients with how should we put it, quite severe mental needs. And looking at the geography of the area, Magdala Road is a short walk from the north of the city into town via Ilkeston Road, and then Milton Street, and then Bentinck. It's like a circuit. It's a circuit from the north down and then back up to the north. I'm also hearing reports of, which I can't share, it wouldn't be fair to, of some of the deceased, and it's...
Oh, Martin, I think we've just lost your audio there. We'll try and get you back for just one moment. We're looking at live pictures, I believe, of some of this forensic work there. Can we get Martin Daubney back, of course? Here we go. Martin, you were just saying that the reaction in Nottingham is hearing names of potential deceased.
Yeah, and without going into details, it just lends itself to the fact that this was very random. The sorts of people I'm hearing about wouldn't have anything to do with a violent crime link, if you like. It seems to be entirely random. And there are also reports that maybe this guy may have initially been on foot and may have taken a van. Lots of speculation, of course, but I've been speaking to people who are right there. And another sad thing, of course, tonight was meant to be the university graduation ball, the biggest event of the student calendar. It should be a time filled full of joy for people who worked so hard for the time. Now looks likely that those events will be called off altogether, or, of course, what kind of person could go and celebrate on a night like this? It happened right in the heart of student land, Forest Fields, Hyson Green, Ilkeston Road, all that area is very densely populated. Bentinck Road with student accommodation, old Victorian houses, but very boisterous, very lively part of Nottingham. And just unimaginable that this kind of event can drop on. But I would say, Tom, I was in Nottingham a couple of weeks ago. I was out with my dad along Milton Street, actually. The city has changed, and not necessarily for the better in the recent sort of 10 years or so. Feels more dangerous on the streets, even around the Market Square. I think now it's a very different Nottingham to the Nottingham I grew up in. A lot more homelessness, a lot more drug use, a lot more low-level street crime. Nottingham has always been a feisty place. It's always been renowned for its vibrant nightlife. But this is just a completely different level, and it's really, really quite heartbreaking.
It is interesting to hear you talk about the particular drug problems in the city, the particular violence and gang problems, which some of our contributors have been saying had been sort of, the city had been getting better. The reputation for gun violence in particular perhaps had been fading behind this city. This event will bring back all of those memories.
It does, yeah, and it may not even be like a drug dealer or drug gang. Could be a user. Could just be somebody who's completely had a psychotic incident. You see people in Nottingham all the time just slumped on the street, just off their heads, in broad daylight around city centre parts, and it's really, really sad to see. In common with a lot of towns, Manchester's the same, with problem with spice and sort of psychotic drugs. It just sort of seems that the likelihood of somebody going off the handle is obviously going to be exacerbated by the backdrop of that kind of social dysfunction. That's the backdrop to modern cities, sadly. But like I say, the data I'm getting, it just appears to be like a random sort of set of events, and the people, I think, when their identities start emerging, I think will show that.
So in your view, and from those who you are talking to in Nottingham, where there must be rumours swirling and information, some of which must be right, some of which will no doubt be misleading as well. All of this sort of cacophony of news swirls around, particularly on social media at times like this. But as far as you understand it, completely at random, people being picked off the street.
Yeah, and also when the London Bridge terror attack occurred, pubs where I used to drink regularly, the Southwark Tavern, the Wheat Sheaf, where the two terrorists were shot outside. Borough Market was a place I know very, very well. And I know a lot of people who own businesses there. Very, very upsetting. But that was very, very clear, Tom. Very, very clear that was a terror-motivated event. It was immediately apparent. And I know that people they would say it's not a terror event because they would try and mitigate those circumstances in the name of whatever political correctness. I don't think that's fair. I don't think the police would release the evidence that they don't think it's terror-related unless they believe that to be true. We have to give the police the benefit of the doubt in very, very difficult times. And not everything has to be a grand conspiracy theory. We have to wait and see. I'm getting intel from people in Nottingham now that they feel this is just a bit more random than something that with a specific setup and modus operandi or even a kind of ideology behind it. That's just what I'm hearing. Could be wrong.
Well, Martin, thank you so much for talking us through your own experiences in Nottingham and the vital background to this tragic incident. Really appreciate your time this afternoon. Martin Daubney there, who grew up in Nottingham, GB News contributor and former MEP. Well, let's again get the very latest headlines in all of the news with Tatiana.
Tom, thank you very much and good afternoon. Our top story on GB News, as you've been hearing, our main story. 3 people have been killed in a series of incidents in Nottingham. Police say 2 bodies were found in the early hours of the morning. They were then called to another incident where a van was used to run down 3 people. A 31-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder. Nottinghamshire Police believes the separate incidents are linked. Kane Brady, who lives in the area, told us he saw an arrest being made.
Woke up to shouts of armed police, and what I said earlier sounded like some very loud commotion, sounded like gunshots. Honestly, it was that loud. We looked out the bedroom window and I saw tasers. I saw a man being dragged out, pinned to the floor. I saw him getting arrested. Who was trying to resist. I then later saw, when they opened the van, I saw a large knife being pulled out. And then straight away, that's when the police then closed off both roads, both Maple Street and Bentinck Road.
Well, here's what we know so far. Just after 4 o'clock this morning, police were called to Ilkeston Road, where the bodies of 2 people were found. They then attended another incident on Milton Street, following reports the driver in a van had tried to run over 3 people. They're being treated in hospital. Another victim, a man, was later found dead in Magdala Road. And for those watching us on TV, this is a live shot of Magdala Road, the last of the 3 sites of the incident. Police are currently collecting evidence. And this is Milton Street, where those 3 people now in hospital were run over. Forensic teams have now arrived at the scene. Well, Charlie Burley is another witness and spoke to us, saying he's never experienced anything like this in the city.
It wasn't just a couple of vehicles, this was dozens of vehicles. And I could see the blue lights flashing through my curtains. I could see the gap between the flashing lights. Of course, that woke me up. I sat in bed for about 10 minutes just hearing the sirens going off and going off and going off. And I actually messaged my girlfriend at 6 a.m. saying something major must be happening around here, because I have never heard an emergency response like this. It was like something else. I've just never heard sirens like it in my life.
The Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has posted on his social media saying, "I want to thank the police and emergency services for their ongoing response to the shocking incident in Nottingham this morning. I'm being kept updated on developments. The police must be given the time to undertake their work. My thoughts are with those injured and the families and loved ones of those who've lost their lives." Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has also paid tribute while addressing the London Tech Week conference.
People here will probably be seeing the news filtering through, and I don't think we can start this session without acknowledging that there has been a serious incident in Nottingham this morning. Information is still coming through, but it's just been reported that 3 people have lost their lives. So I'm sure I speak for everybody in this room in saying that we'd like to just send our thoughts to all those affected and to the emergency services who are responding to this as we speak.
This is GB News. More as it happens. Tom.
This is GB News. Now we'll bring you more news as it happens, and indeed a 31-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of the murder of 2 people who were found dead in the street of Ilkeston Road in Nottingham just after 4 a.m. this morning, and indeed a 3rd man who was then also found dead in Magdala Road. Another 3 people are in hospital after someone tried to run them over in a van in Milton Street, in what the police believe is all connected as incidents. Well, joining me now is GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White. And Mark, what can we make of this particular event? These 3 separate cordons that the police are all investigating.
Well, I mean, we've been told, obviously, by the police that these events are linked. What we don't know, of course, is the chronology of what happened. Where I am at the moment is actually on Milton Street, which is right smack bang in Nottingham city centre. It's here where the van, we're told, mounted a pavement, attempted to knock over people in this area. Some 3 people, we're told, were taken to hospital as a result of that. Just within the last 10 minutes, the forensic teams have arrived here at the scene. They're still there, in fact, so I'm just going to pop out of the way and give you the shot to the right of frame, where you see 2 forensic officers, and they've been looking in particular at this road here and to the left, where there is a bus stop, and it looks like there may be a sort of small pile of clothing by the bus stop itself. Police actually continuing to cordon off this area because it's clearly very close to the spot where a number of these people were injured, and it's also right close to a pedestrian area. So the pedestrian area leading down to the street as I speak, just being cordoned off by these officers just now, just to keep members of the public away from this particular area. Thankfully, for now at least, the press are being allowed to stay here. But those forensic teams are really part of what is now a slow time investigation. So we had the very urgent response to the multiple emergency calls that were reporting multiple incidents in the early hours of this morning around Nottingham, and that of course required an immediate response to deal with the casualties and to try to find the alleged suspect, who of course we now know about an hour and a half later was arrested. And just as I speak, counting my chickens before they're hatched, unfortunately, this officer is going to move us. I think he's just going to allow us to finish our live, which is very kind of him. Yeah, so that was obviously the sort of fast time response to the calls and dealing with the casualties, and then getting up to speed with who the suspect was, the arrest that took place there. Now what's happening as the day progresses is the more methodical investigation, and that of course a big part of that are the forensic teams, these highly trained specialists who are here really just to go over in minute detail each of these crime scenes to gather as much information as they can on what exactly happened at each location, so they can build up in their mind, of course, the exact chronology of the incidents as they unfolded as well. So with that, because this police officer is looking a bit anxious, we're just going to move back about 100 yards or so. You can continue speaking to us if you want, Tom, but it might be a bit shaky visually.
Well, Mark, it is interesting that this police cordon is being expanded at this time. There was speculation that perhaps streets would be opening up throughout the day, but if anything, what we're seeing now is less access. Why might you be being asked to walk backwards now? Why might this police cordon be being expanded at this moment in time?
This happens all of the time, and all of the major incidents that I've covered over the years. What happens with the initial responses, they have to police it according to the resources they've got to hand at any one time. Thanks very much, officer. Cheers. We'll come back and get that. So in the first instance, obviously the officers that they have on duty are involved in trying to secure the immediate locations. Then, as they get often mutual aid, so there will be other forces helping out. For instance, we know that there are armed response officers involved in a number of operations around the city connected to this today, and some of those are from the neighbouring force of Derbyshire. Well, once they get this mutual aid, the extra officers called in back on duty to help out, then that just gives them more control of the scene. They're able, as they always do, to expand the cordon, to push it back, because they don't want a lot of us gopping right down the barrel of a lens at all these forensic teams doing what can sometimes, be work that is quite delicate in nature, depending on what they're actually looking for. So they want as much as they can to sort of push the public, and indeed us, the press, back out of the way so they can get on with that. Now, I should say that, and I just mentioned there that there were other linked incidents ongoing. Again, that's part and parcel, Tom, of what we see when the more protracted investigation is underway now. What we've seen, and our colleagues have seen, is armed officers in Ilkeston Road. Now, Ilkeston Road is the location where 2 people were found dead this morning. We think a man and a woman. If we just get a shot to the left there, Will, you can see another group of officers coming down. This is indicative of what I was saying about more reinforcements that come in and give the police control of an area. So this is what we're seeing, and our friendly officer is just moving us back to the cordon further down this street. So in Ilkeston Road, there was an armed operation just a short time ago involving some of those armed officers from the neighbouring force of Derbyshire. It, as I understand it, resulted in a raid, or at least a search, of a commercial premises near Ilkeston Road, and 2 women from that area were taken away in the back of a police vehicle. Now, we don't know if these are individuals who were arrested or people that have been taken away just, as potential witnesses to what unfolded, or potential contacts and witnesses to who this individual might be that was arrested in connection with these linked attacks. But then another street just a short distance away from Ilkeston Road, more armed police again searching a premises there. And as I say, Tom, that's not unusual, because what we'll often get in these cases, once they have got all of their resources in place, and I'm just now, having walked all the way down the street, we can come back into vision for you there. Sorry about that. It's just the perils of trying to broadcast right in the middle of a live and still dynamic investigation. But yes, once the sort of investigation kicks in proper, of course, what they then have got, the police, is more information on their suspect in this case. Mm-hmm. So what they will do is they will check out addresses connected to that individual, either where that person lives or works, also addresses maybe of family members and friends. And so what you will often find in the hours after an event like this is a number of people brought into custody. It's often described as an arrest, but that's just police procedure in dealing with people who may have to give a statement that's later used in a court of law, and we don't know at this stage whether these people may fall into the bracket of suspect or witness. So it's part of the police procedure in these cases that people will be rounded up and spoken to. They often turn out to be material witnesses more than anything else, and will be released in the fullness of time. But that's the important phase we're in at the moment, really trying to determine what the motivation of this suspect was. We don't think, according to our sources, that it is terrorist related, and I think that's borne out by the fact that this morning we haven't had throughout the day a meeting scheduled of the government's crisis cabinet Cobra. That's not taken place. The messages coming out from Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, from Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, have yes, certainly been about expressing their shock about the events that happened and their thanks to the emergency services, but not going that step further and suggesting that this might be terrorist related. So I think the direction for the time being that we're going towards is a criminal act, certainly. 3 people have been killed, stabbed to death, and also potentially it may go into issues of a disturbed mind or another motivation. We don't know at this stage. We're expecting, Tom, a news conference from Nottinghamshire Police at some point this afternoon, when hopefully these unanswered questions about the timeline of what has happened, how it happened, how events unfolded, and again, the potential motivation might come to light.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for bearing with us there as you walked the length of that street. And indeed, as we saw those extraordinary pictures of more and more police coming on the scene, it tells a very important part of this story, those supporting officers joining the Nottinghamshire police force, I suppose, and expanding those cordons. And indeed, that news of those two properties, two so far, that have been searched, as far as you understand it, by armed police. Mark White will be back with you later on in the show, but for now, thank you very much for all of that. And joining me next is the former Detective Superintendent Shabnam Chowdhury. And Shabnam, thank you so much for making the time for us this afternoon. Of course, this is an active police investigation, but I'm interested in these properties that appear to have been searched now by armed police. One commercial property, as far as we understand it, and one residential property. And the interesting news that two individuals have been led out of that commercial property into the back of a car with police markings on it. What does this suggest in terms of how the investigation is progressing?
Well, it's exactly as you say. It's a very fast-moving investigation. They've got a suspect in custody. It may be that either he's known to them or they are eliciting information from him that will allow them to come out and search those particular premises. Don't want to speculate, but the likelihood is that the two people that have come out of the premises could be potential witnesses or maybe known to the other victims or certainly potentially the perpetrator. So they will be treated, spoken to by police as part and parcel of the investigation in order to help them to determine the absolute facts of what has actually happened here from 4 a.m. this morning.
Now, this is, of course, a big, big event. 3 deaths, 3 hospitalisations, the national media attention. How large will this police investigation be? What sort of resourcing will be going into this? There are, of course, 3 separate cordons, which now we learn seem to be expanding as time goes on.
Yeah, I was listening to your reporter earlier on in terms of the cordons. That's not unusual to widen the cordons, to have an inner cordon and to have an outer cordon. And it may be that the forensic team have set up a strategy that they want to widen those in order to maximise their opportunities around forensication of the scene. 3 scenes, which is actually quite wide-spanning. The fact that Nottingham have already declared this a major incident will give you an indication of how big this is for them, and the big likelihood is that they are working with cross-border forces to ensure that they've got sufficient resources in terms of officers that will come across. Their own local officers will be doing reassurance patrols, will be talking to the public to try to reassure them that, you know, hopefully that they feel safer, because it's absolutely horrific incident that has taken place today. So there will be a lot going on. The officers that come from other forces will be supporting the investigation teams in terms of the cordons or patrolling the area, but local officers will be talking to people that they know so that they can also get further information and intelligence in order to progress the investigation.
Now, declaring this event a major incident, I'm assuming, isn't just a term for the media. This has real-world implications. There's sort of a level of seriousness that an event needs to reach in order to be declared an official major incident. What does that mean?
It basically means that, the fact that there's been 3 people that have been found dead, murdered, and in 3 different locations, the fact that a van has tried to cause some injury to other victims, members of the community, would indicate that, first of all, they've got to decide what this actual incident is. Is this, and I'm not saying it is or isn't because we don't know, and it certainly hasn't been mentioned at this stage, but short of saying it's terrorism incident, they've declared this a major incident. The news that will unfold throughout the day will actually determine what it is. As I say, I don't want to speculate because we don't have the full facts, and Nottinghamshire Police will come out at some stage with a statement to the general public. But yeah, because of the fact that this is so random at this stage, the fact that it took place at 4 a.m. in the morning, people will be concerned. And what one of the reasons they would declare it a major incident is because they want to look at what has led to this incident and to ensure that there aren't going to be any further incidents, and that they want to reassure public to make sure that they've got the right resources, they've got the right training, the right skills in order to progress the investigation to bring the offender to justice.
Now, we are expecting a news conference later on this afternoon from Nottinghamshire Police. But in your experience, would we expect any more information to drip out before that news conference?
No, I don't think you can expect the police to come out and drip feed members of the public and the press in terms of what's going on. This, as I said, is a very fast-moving investigation. They've got a suspect in custody. They've got to decide at which point they will speak to this individual. They will have done their own investigations very, very quickly in order to try to identify the individual. Obviously, there's victims in this as well, so they need to identify the victims. Is there a connection to them? Did this particular individual target those individuals, or was it a completely random attack? So totally understandable why it's been declared a major incident, because of the fact that this will have national interest and also international interest from the wider public.
Well, Shabnam Chowdhury, former detective superintendent, thank you so much for your expertise and analysis there in this fast-moving situation. Really appreciate your time this afternoon. Let's get more on this now. Joining me in the studio is security specialist Will Geddes. And Will, I suppose people sitting at home will be worried in a large degree that just walking down a road in any city in the United Kingdom, sort of seeing a 2-ton white van might now be a rather worrying experience for some people. What is your advice to people in perhaps busy areas who might feel slightly perturbed by these events today?
Well, I think it's quite broad, Tom. I mean, to be honest, we've seen vehicles being used as a platform for attack by various different individuals, groups, terrorists, all sorts. So I think realistically, most people are fairly pragmatic about it. I think that a lot of people today will have been reminded that we're actually at a substantial level in terms of the UK threat level, which means that a terrorist attack is likely. So, you know, most of the time, I think the vast majority of us will go about our daily lives, unless you're working in the sector like me, and not really need to think about it or worry about it. And I think people, you know, fundamentally need to be generally situationally aware, you know, just for their own personal safety against being robbed or mugged or assaulted in the street by some ne'er-do-well.
It is interesting because this incident has all of these sort of similarities to terrorist attacks that we've seen in recent years, whether it's the sort of random stabbings or the van being used as a weapon. But the police aren't treating this as a terror incident. It's likely it could be somehow gang-related random act of violence, perhaps a mental health incident. It's interesting that the police in Nottinghamshire aren't treating this as a terror event, at least at this stage.
Well, you know, again, they haven't confirmed that. They haven't confirmed that they're treating it like a terrorism event, and I think it's too early to call it. And I think the fact, although Mark made some very, very valid points, you know, they haven't called a Cobra meeting, which is usually a trigger from the back and is an indicator and a confirmation. Nottinghamshire Police's statement later is obviously going to be, you know, hopefully the tell-all of exactly what is going on here. You know, from my experience, 30 years odd of doing this, I had drawn certainly a lot of parallels, a lot of indicators, a lot of signatures to this being potentially a terrorism event, or certainly being treated as one. You know, we look at the very, very broad cordon initially, the very heavy multi-agency response. We were looking at trams, trains being diverted and buses being diverted, obviously out of the city centre. We're looking at, obviously, a number of individuals that have turned up on scene or certainly been eyewitness, including military. So, you know, there are a lot of things which would say to me, and particularly the methodology and the modus operandi of the attack. We're looking at 3 people killed. We're looking at 3 different locations. We're looking at 3 people injured. We've heard of a knife, a very large knife being held by the perpetrator. We've looked at the vehicle actually being involved in the injury of a number of individuals. You know, the one thing that I've discussed with a lot of counter-terrorism sort of counterparts has been the time of day. And the one thing was the time of day, which is put into question.
Yes. Very, very odd. If you want a big impact for some sort of attack, if you were thinking like a terrorist, wouldn't you want to hit people at commuting time or sort of in the middle of the day? Isn't that much more usual?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Tommy. You're looking at a maximum sort of number of people, you know, high population in a particular area. Depending on what the attack is, whether it be someone with a knife, someone with, you know, an IED, or someone who's using a vehicle for that matter, you want to get mass casualties. So the one peculiarity, the one question mark is obviously about the time of day. Now, that doesn't necessarily rule out it still being terrorism, because we've certainly seen occasions where individuals have accelerated their plan when they felt that they were going to be potentially apprehended. Now, we don't know at this stage, we may not find out even in the future, whether this individual was actually already under surveillance, whether this person was known to the authorities. But the one thing certainly from Mark's report, which is pushing me towards the fact that this is possibly someone that was off-grid, someone that they were not aware of, is the fact that they're actually going to their commercial premises. They're going to a number of other locations. There's another address I think Mark mentioned, which they're also investigating and searching. So that would say to me that they don't already have a profile on this individual, and they're exploring every opportunity and every motivation. The person they have in custody, again, depending on how willing they are to talk and to obviously be participant in any interview process, will again tell us an awful lot, which I'm sure, hopefully, we will hear about in the press conference, the official press conference later.
That's an incredibly interesting insight. The fact that there are all of these different searches, meaning that the police are almost trying to build a profile on this individual. And whether it's terrorism, whether it's organised crime, whether it's a random act of violence, it does seem that in sort of modern-day security thinking, perhaps our security services are actually really rather good at finding the plotters, at finding those who are organised. And it's the lone wolves or the sort of, you know, spur-of-the-moment individuals who go off and do this stuff are the ones that slip through the net.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of those are, I mean, and again, don't be deceived by the fact that if this individual comes out with some low-level criminality in their history, that exempts them from potential terrorism. A vast majority of terrorists that have been apprehended or been involved in major events have been involved in some criminality at some point in their lives, so they'll be known to the authorities. Now, again, one of the things that Mark mentions, and again, I go to Mark's very, very astute report, is the chronology. You know, what happened when and at what time and in what location. And those are the key things that I would want to know, and will also build a picture as to how this situation evolved and possibly even the motivation. Was there a targeting list, or was it random? Again, were the victims known to the perpetrator, or were these unfortunate individuals who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, Tom?
Well, Will Geddes, thank you so much for talking us through those issues there. Some big, big questions. And, of course, this is all leading up to what we expect to be a fairly comprehensive press conference with Nottinghamshire Police later this afternoon. We'll bring you that as soon as we get it. We are still awaiting on any confirmation of the timing for that. But as soon as we find that, we will bring that to you, as indeed we will bring any more information. As we've been going over, there have been searches of properties, both residential and commercial. There's been 1 arrest, 3 deaths and 3 hospitalisations. This is a fast-moving investigation, and the one place to get all of your news on it is GB News, of course. But it's not just Nottingham that is going on today. There are other issues around the United Kingdom, and we'll cross over now to Tatiana to bring you your wider news update.
Yes, thank you very much, Tom. And in other news today, the first public hearing in the COVID-19 inquiry is underway. The initial stage is focusing on whether the country was properly prepared. A solicitor representing the bereaved families for justice says today marks the end of a 2-year battle. A video sharing the experiences of some of those who suffered most during the pandemic was played to the inquiry.
The most you can hope is to give your loved one a good death. And we will forever carry the guilt that our daddy was denied that.
I'm angry. I need questions answered. I'm just still hurt and I'm still upset.
And the time that he needed me most, I wasn't there. And I felt guilty about that, even though it wasn't my fault.
The number of people in work has hit a record high. The jobless rate unexpectedly fell to 3.8% in the 3 months to April. The Office for National Statistics data also shows employment rose past its pre-pandemic level for the first time. Average weekly wages hit a post-COVID record too, but they're still down when taking inflation into account. A mother and her partner have been convicted over the death of a 9-year-old boy. Alfie Steele had 50 injuries on his body and was found submerged in a bath at their home in Worcestershire. Carlos Scott was found guilty of manslaughter and Dirk Howell was convicted of his murder. And a British man has been detained in South Korea after climbing the world's 5th tallest building. More than 90 emergency service workers were sent to the 1,800-foot-tall Lot World Tower after a man was spotted scaling the building. George King Thompson was arrested after reaching the 72nd floor. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website at gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2573 and 1.1648 euros. The price of gold is £1,558 and 75 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,568 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Welcome back to GB News Live. Now, new footage shows that armed police have been stacking up outside a house around the Balfour Road area. This, of course, in Nottingham. Armed police waiting to enter a building by the looks of this footage, which we have just been in receipt of. We can see those armed police being filmed out of a window. Apologies for the shaky camera work here, but it's a very, very important set of images, and we can see a whole load of armed police awaiting, by the looks of it, to enter a residential property there around the Balfour Road area of Nottingham. Well, more on this as we get it. Of course, this is a fast-moving situation, a fast-moving investigation. In the last few minutes, we've seen cordons expand within the Nottingham area. More police, we assume, from neighbouring police forces joining the investigation and indeed the cordoning operation. Well, let's get more on what could be going on now with retired Scotland Yard Inspector Hamish Brown, MBE. Hamish, thank you for making the time for us this afternoon. This is clearly a large police operation now engulfing Nottingham. The trams have stopped, the buses have stopped. It is not a normal day in this city. Can you think to any parallels in your career as a Scotland Yard inspector?
Yeah, certainly when we look back over the years, and Nottingham, yes, it's a city, but it's not as big as other cities. And what we have is this dreadful incident at the moment, these deaths. But, you know, when we go back to the 90s, we had Dunblane. When we go back to the 70s, we had Hungerford, a man indiscriminately shooting people in a little Berkshire town. So it's inexplicable what people can do. But whatever the situation is, the police have to face up to it and get on with it. And you have correctly identified a number of facets to this case, the armed police. I think we can see them just now. We have a scene. We have officers coming in from other forces. So there's a lot to be dealt with here. And I think what has to be emphasised is the police probably don't know the exact motive. They probably have a good idea what's gone on, but why did this happen? And with that, they'll be looking at a number of aspects. Of course, the suspect themselves, and mental health has been mentioned a few times. We don't know, but they'll look into that side. Certainly connections. If there's a mobile phone, properties have been searched. What about computers and other IT? Is there information from that? And as the picture grows and grows, the police will have more to work on, and we've seen pictures of police almost queuing up and what looks like there's going to be an armed raid somewhere. Well, there's good reason they've gone there, and but we'll have to keep an open mind on this because we don't know, and speculation doesn't help, and conspiracy theorists, please keep away. And I think as far as the police liaison or press liaison is concerned, you know, the police got a lot on their hands. They can't answer all the questions. They won't give quite rightly so, won't give a running commentary, but they'll have to give out some information, if nothing else, to appease the public. And I think they'll probably do a press conference later on what they can say, but they mustn't jeopardise the investigation, nor indeed if other people are involved. I'm not saying they were, but this is something the police will be certainly looking at. What is it all about? I'm pretty certain they'll get the full jigsaw put together, but at the moment it's very fragmented, different scenes. We've got a van, they've got a deposit in the road that was covered by a tent earlier. That will be intense forensic examination, which might take a little bit of time, preserving the scene, hence the tent. So it's a fine sunny day at the moment, but you know, it can rain and all sorts of things can happen. So a lot on their plate at the moment.
Certainly, and we are being told to expect some sort of press conference later this afternoon, although we do not have a time for that as things stand. It is fascinating to see all the different elements of this operation coming together, because it is such a wide geographic area over which these incidents have been dispersed in a way. You've got Magdala Road up in the north of Nottingham, Milton Street right in the heart of Nottingham, and out to the west, Ilkeston Road, where 2 individuals were found dead in the street. This is a really wide and sprawling investigation. What sort of parallels would you draw?
Well, I'm not sure about parallels, but we've looked at other investigations. Yes, terrorism has been mentioned. I don't know if this was terrorist related, so the speculation is wrong. But what it has shown is the police dealing with a very difficult situation, and well done for the Nottingham police being there at 4 a.m, you know, so that they move pretty quickly. And from there, they're just putting everything together. So we'll have to see really what comes from that. And I think it's seen the police at their best and most professional, not a form of entertainment, incidentally, this. I'm pleased the police are coming across well, and well done in that respect. Haven't had the best of publicity recently, have they? So they're going to move on with that side, and this is highly publicised. But you know, there are other sides to it as the investigation goes on, the house-to-house inquiries, knocking on doors, reassuring the public. That's not so high profile. And one dreadful aspect of this, and this is why we're talking about this awful crime, is 3 people have lost their lives. And with that, and these are specialist trained officers, they're called victim liaison officers, and they will be allocated to the respective families. Now, we haven't heard about the deceased at the moment, and quite rightly so. But they will have to go round, one in the first instance, to do that dreadful knock on the door and tell someone that their children or their husband or whoever is not coming home. I've been there, and it really is the worst job you can possibly do. But after that, the public will want, the bereaved will want support, they'll want information, they'll want to know just what's going on. So it's a painstaking job, but it isn't all high profile and good viewing for the cameras. There's an awful lot going on, and in a few days' time this will hardly appear on TV and we'll move on to something else. But at the moment it's capturing the police doing the job they should do. Nottingham police have moved very quickly. Yes, they will bring in aid from other forces, they've got to, but life will go on for them, as indeed it will go on for the police service as well.
And I wouldn't expect we'd learn the identities or the names of the deceased until the police were absolutely sure they'd contacted the next of kin, the families, and done that crucial liaison work, which could take some time. We don't know, for example, there's been speculation that there may well have been students involved. Family could be not from the local area. This could be a lengthy process. In your experience, how long would it take to establish those family connections, next of kin, to do that victim liaison work?
The police will not be persuading that this has got to be done as soon as possible. And I'm sure their parents and friends all around the country, maybe with relatives at university, other people who know someone works in Nottingham, we just don't know. So they're going to move this pretty quickly, and they'll look for identification on the person. Maybe people knew them. There are all sorts of things. But what I would say is once they have been identified, once the relatives have been informed, please respect the relatives, the bereaved privacy and the dreadful time they're going to go through. And the media and other people, leave them alone. This isn't going to help at all. Ask the police lots of questions, difficult questions if you want, but leave that side alone. But yes, it's a nasty part of the job. The police will have to get on, identify the people, and then it might be different parts of the world, who knows, or it might be in this country, and then go round with that dreadful news. But it is part of the job, and in a very peculiar way, it's a very satisfying part of the job if you can get it right and discharge that job with humanity and some sort of dignity. But yes, it's a huge operation for the Nottinghamshire Police. Other forces will be coming in. Many aspects to this investigation, which will continue, not under the cameras, but it will just go on, and the intense forensic examination of all sorts of exhibits. And they will piece this together, I am sure. But please, I say again, the speculation, the conspiracy theorists, let the police put it together. There's been talk of a firearm or a gunshot. Well, the van crashed into something, and it could come across as a gun going off. Again, we don't know. So let the police get on with it. They will release information from time to time, but the running commentary every few minutes coming forward, this won't help them at all. They've got better things to deal with, but I think they are cooperating with the media. They'll have a media liaison officer there, so the reporting people at the scene or back in the studio, they know full well how it works. And I think it is important they are appraised with something, and hopefully, ultimately, they'll get the entire picture.
Well, Hamish, really appreciate your expertise this afternoon on GB News Live. Thank you very much for coming on and talking us through what exactly might be going on the ground there. Hamish Brown, MBE, former Scotland Yard inspector. Well, earlier today, GB News spoke to an eyewitness of the event, Charlie Burley. This is what he heard and saw.
I live about 5 minutes down the road from Magdala Road, which is, of course, where we now know one of the bodies was found. I live in Sherwood, which is a very small, tight-knit community, very quiet. About 5:20 this morning, I was awakened by the sound of just an absolute cacophony of sirens. And it lasted for what I would say must be about half an hour. It was just siren after siren, vehicle after vehicle heading down Mansfield Road, which is the main road that connects where I live in Sherwood down to Magdala Road. It's about a 5-minute walk from here. And at that point, I had no idea what was going on, of course, but in that sort of situation, you assume people are heading into the city centre. But the emergency response, of course, was only just down the road from here. And it's such a quiet and peaceful area. It's come as a huge shock to everyone that lives here, all the residents, of course, that live nearby. And yeah, I mean, everyone is shocked and devastated by the news, of course.
So what did you spring out of bed and look out the window? What did you do, Charlie?
Yeah, exactly that. So the first couple of sirens I heard, I thought, okay, you know, that's normal. You kind of expect that. Maybe not on a Monday night. You know, Nottingham is a vibrant student city, but it's more at the weekends you tend to get the emergency vehicles going into town. But it became apparent after that it wasn't just a couple of vehicles. This was dozens of vehicles, and I could see the blue lights flashing through my my curtains. I could see the sort of the gap between the flashing lights. Of course, that woke me up. I sat in bed for about 10 minutes just hearing the sirens going off and going off and going off. And I actually messaged my girlfriend at 6 a.m. saying something major must be happening around here, because I have never heard an emergency response like this. It was like something else. You know, I've just never heard sirens like it in my life.
Charlie, we're all worrying that maybe this was targeted at students because student land is nearby, and sometimes students are, as you say, it's a vibrant student city, busier at the weekends. Are there many student bars in that area?
No, this is the interesting thing about Mapley Park and Magdala Road is it's not. It's a quiet residential area, and it's actually out of the city centre. You would have to perhaps make a 10-minute journey out of the city centre via a vehicle to actually get there. So it's not in the city centre itself, which is why, of course, for the residents living around here, it's come as such a shock. But Nottingham, of course, is a massive student city, as you mentioned, and a lot of the routes heading out of the city centre are back to areas that are populated by students. You've got Forest Fields just down the road from here, probably about a 10-minute walk, which is a huge student area. So it is, you know, it's not unusual to see students walking home at 5 a.m. or perhaps getting an e-scooter back. You know, it's very, very common in Nottingham because, as you say, it is a student city, and a lot of these students do go out in the week as well.
Well, that was Charlie Burley, the voice you heard there, an eyewitness to the event, telling us earlier what he heard and what he saw. But let's get more now with how the investigation is progressing and what we know so far. Joining me now is the former Director of Professional Standards at the Metropolitan Police, Stephen Roberts. And Stephen, thank you for making the time for us this afternoon. We're hearing all sorts of sort of small bits of information. We've seen footage of armed police line up outside a residential property, or what looked like a residential property. We've seen the cordons in the centre of Nottingham be expanded. Does this match up with your experience of these sort of events?
Yes, it does. The first response to any incident is really a matter of listening to what the caller has said and getting appropriate resources to the scene to find out what's actually going on, because very often when there's an emergency call made to the police, the story that's given to the first operator is quite different to the facts on the ground. But it looks as though the control room, the police control room in the early hours of this morning, must have received multiple calls about serious violence in different parts of the city. So the response, as we've heard from your previous interviewee, was to send an awful lot of different vehicles into the area to get it cut off, to get things stabilised as quickly as possible. It rather looks as though the control room decided that this might be some sort of extremist marauding attack around the city with lots and lots of people attacking the public, and sent in ambulance, fire service, as well as police officers to stabilise the situation and to find out what on earth was going on. That would mean you cut off the city centre as a whole, find out what's going on, and then gradually identify the specific scenes of what's happened where, find any casualties, save life where you can, obviously, and try to prevent the further loss of life by finding and isolating however many suspects there are. And in this case, it seems that there was only one. And I noticed from the photos that you've been broadcasting, it looks as though a taser has been used on him in order to detain him safely. And at that stage, stability is restored and the police can get on with finding out what's really happened, gathering evidence and looking for casualties and, wherever possible, saving life.
It is fascinating that the police relatively quickly in this investigation thought it likely that these 3 different locations across the city were connected as one event. How do you think they reached that conclusion?
It sounds as though the person who was in charge of the police control room was very sharp, very switched on, and made the right snap decision very quickly. And he or she deserves great credit for that. It's always better in those sorts of situations to overreact and then be able to row back from that than to underreact and send maybe 1 or 2 officers into a scene which could be hugely dangerous, not save the public, and put those officers at risk. They made the right call on this occasion.
No, it does seem that they've been working incredibly professionally, and indeed we've seen a lot of praise for the quick work of the police, not least from the 3 local members of Parliament from 2 different parties coming together in a joint statement praising the work of the emergency services this morning. I wonder what happens now. Clearly, there are different cordons across the city. There are different forensic teams doing their work. What can we expect to happen in the coming hours?
In the coming hours, those forensic teams will be very carefully examining the known crime scenes to gather whatever evidence is there to put before a criminal court in due course. I would hope to see that those the cordons will be gradually reduced to allow the rest of the city to carry on with its business. At the end of the day, Nottingham city centre has to return to normality. So the police service will be acutely conscious that whilst they have got the imperative of gathering evidence, there is also a competing, if you like, imperative of allowing normality to resume and reassuring the public that however horrendous the events have been, normality is on its way back. The huge, overwhelming majority of the public are perfectly safe. The situation is under control. And local MPs are part of that process, as will be local faith leaders, local council leaders, will be part of the process of reassuring the community and restoring normality. But there will always be an inherent conflict between the absolute need to gather evidence and the need to reassure the public and to restore normality.
We're just seeing on our screens now, for those watching on television, some of those armed police around the side of what looks like a residential property. And I just wonder that for some people in Nottingham, this will feel like this was an event that happened at 4 in the morning, it's over, it's done with. But for others, perhaps, who now see armed police running down their street, running alongside perhaps their neighbours or indeed their own property, this will feel like a live event still.
Oh yes, and you know, this can be very traumatic for people to witness. Since I've retired as a member of the public, I've actually, by sheer coincidence, happened to walk past when armed police did what's called a hard stop on a vehicle right next to me. And even knowing what goes on, even knowing how professional these officers are, I was taken aback and, yes, slightly frightened. So there will be a need to actually speak to the people who've witnessed some of these things, and just to make sure that they understand what's happened, they understand that the dangers that they may have perceived are over, and that normality is on its way back, and that the world is actually not as dangerous a place as it might have seemed only a few hours ago.
Well, Stephen Roberts, it's been absolutely fascinating to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon as this event continues to unfold in Nottingham. The former Director of Professional Standards at the Metropolitan Police there, Stephen Roberts. My name's Tom Harwood and this is GB News Live. We'll be back after these few messages.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know, Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But boom.
And action.
Sergeant Reed, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Fridays from 8, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You're with GB News Live this afternoon, and my name is Tom Harwood. Well, 3 people have been killed and 3 more are in hospital after a major incident in Nottingham. Exclusive pictures obtained by GB News show the moment the suspect was arrested. GB News has also obtained exclusive pictures of armed raids taking place in the Balfour Road area of the city. Several streets remain locked off. At a third location, the suspect appears to have tried to run people down while driving a white van. We are live in the city, across the city, and we'll bring you all the details throughout the programme. Well, Tatiana can now bring you all the latest developments from Nottingham.
Tom, thank you and good afternoon. Our main story this afternoon, 3 people have been killed in a series of incidents in Nottingham. Police say 2 bodies were found in the early hours of the morning. They were then called to another incident where a van was used to run down 3 people. A 31-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder. Nottinghamshire Police believes the separate incidents are linked. Kane Brady, who lives in the area, told us he saw an arrest being made.
To shouts of armed police, and what I said earlier sounded like some very large commotion, sounded like gunshots. Honestly, it was that loud. We looked out the bedroom window and I saw tasers. I saw a man being dragged out, pinned to the floor. I saw him getting arrested, who was trying to resist. I then later saw When they opened the van, I saw a large knife being pulled out. And then straight away, that's when the police then closed off both roads, both Maple Street and Bentinck Road.
Here's what we know so far. Just after 4 o'clock this morning, police were called to Ilkeston Road, where the bodies of 2 people were found. They then attended another incident on Milton Street following reports the driver in a van had tried to run over 3 people. They're now being treated in hospital. Another victim, a man, was later found dead in Magdala Road. Forensic teams are now at the scene on Magdala Road collecting evidence. Earlier, a large tent was erected, shielding a smaller tent at the site. Armed officers, some wearing balaclavas, could be seen on Balfour Road, a few hundred yards from the main cordon. Police entered a commercial property on the street and 2 young women were eventually put into the back of a marked car. Armed police appeared to then rush to a separate location further down the road, quickly cordoning off an adjoining street. The Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has posted on social media saying, "I want to thank the police and emergency services for their ongoing response to the shocking incident in Nottingham this morning. I'm being kept updated on developments. The police must be given the time to undertake their work. My thoughts are with those injured and the family and loved ones of those who have lost their lives." Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has also paid tribute while addressing the London Tech Week conference.
People here will probably be seeing the news filtering through, and I don't think we can start this session without acknowledging that there has been a serious incident in Nottingham this morning. Information is still coming through, but it's just been reported that 3 people have lost their lives. So I'm sure I speak for everybody in this room in saying that we'd like to just send our thoughts to all those affected and to the emergency services who are responding to this as we speak.
You're with GB News. More as it happens. Now it's back to Tom.
A 31-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after 2 people were found dead on the streets in Ilkeston Road in Nottingham just after 4 a.m. this morning, and a 3rd man was then found dead in Magdala Road. Another 3 people are in hospital after someone tried to run them over in a van in Milton Street in what was believed, or indeed in what police believe to be, a connected incident. Joining me for the very latest is GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White. And Mark, already in the last hour or so, you have been moved. The cordon where you are has expanded. What more can you tell us?
Well, yeah, you mentioned Milton Street there in your introduction. That's where we are now, at the bottom end of Milton Street, having been much further up the road, just very close to the spot, actually, where it's alleged this van was driven at 3 people early this morning. The forensic teams have moved in now, so we're giving them space to carry out that very detailed examination of what is obviously a crime scene. And as I was saying to you before, Tom, it's not unusual once we get more in the way of police resources into an area for them to gain more control of the area, to make it a more sterile environment for those police detectives and forensics officers to do their job away from the gaze of the media and the public. So they do tend to push the cordons back. There's been a lot of activity, though, not just a slow time investigative process that we're seeing here with the forensics as we speak. About half a mile or so from here, up in Ilkeston Road, we have seen armed police raiding an address there within the last hour, and also armed police also at the scene of another property that's being searched in Balfour Road, not too far from Ilkeston Road. Now, this is not at all unusual. We see this all of the time in the wake of these very significant and serious incidents where the suspect is being investigated and the police are able to when they speak to him and when they search that person, they're able to gain more insight into who they are, where they live. And so you see fairly soon, in the hours after an attack like this, you see the home address usually of the suspect being raided, maybe his work address. Also, of course, family, close family and friends may also be subject to a police raid and a search of their property as well. It's part and parcel of the ongoing evidence gathering phase. The police also have to rule out that there aren't any other individuals out there that may be linked to their main suspect that might be planning something similar as well. So that's why we're seeing a lot of police activity, and out of an abundance of caution, of course, given what has unfolded in Nottingham in the early hours of the morning. There are armed police involved in all of these search operations to gain entry to the properties, to secure them, to then make way for the detectives and the forensic teams to start their investigations as well.
Mark, do we have any more information on this reported news conference by Nottinghamshire Police that we're expecting later on this afternoon? Do we have any more details at all about what that might involve and when it might be?
Well, we were told initially there was a possibility of a news conference later in the afternoon, but in speaking to Nottinghamshire Police, they are not mentioning any time as yet with regard to any update. Got to, I think, cut them some slack. They're head deep in all of the proactive investigation, you know, and all of the elements around that investigation. And still, as we've been reporting on in terms of these armed operations, it's still a dynamic police investigation that is underway. So, yeah, I'll cut them a little bit of slack, you know, for not keeping us exactly up to speed on when they might be in a position to talk more formally to the press. But I'm sure they know, of course, that the public is anxious to get some kind of an idea of what exactly unfolded. We don't, for instance, have anything to tell us about the chronology of the events that unfolded. We know that there was at least 3 separate incidents, with a fatal stabbing at one incident in Magdalen Road. At Ilkeston Road we had a double fatal stabbing, and then further up here in Milton Street we had those 3 people who were injured as this van apparently drove towards them. So, but what the actual sequence of events was it the car incident first, followed by the stabbings, the other way about? We just don't know. And these are the kind of unanswered questions, along, I think, with the also trying to get an idea about the motivation for the suspect here. I'm sorry, I'm just moving out of the way because, as you understand, with the crime scene here, we've got police vehicles moving in and out. At least this time, Tom, we're not asking us to do the 100-yard dash down the road live on air. But yeah, so as I say, we're still in the early stages, so I'm sure as soon as the police feel that they have enough to say, that their officers are not, you know, needed for the very fast time proactive elements of the investigation, that they can come away from that and then share what they know with the press, they'll do that. It might well be later on this afternoon.
Well, Mark, we'll come to you as soon as you have more information on that question, or indeed on any other aspect of this investigation. Thank you for those very latest updates there from the front line of the police cordon on Milton Street in the centre of Nottingham. Now, the political reaction has already been coming in this morning from all sides of the House of Commons. The leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer, has spoken out about the incident at London's Tech Week. He paid tribute to those who lost their lives and to the emergency services who have been responding.
People here will probably be seeing the news filtering through, and I don't think we can start this session without acknowledging that there has been a serious incident in Nottingham this morning. Information is still coming through, but it's just been reported that 3 people have lost their lives. So I'm sure I speak for everybody in this room in saying that we'd like to just send our thoughts to all those affected and to the emergency services who are responding to this as we speak.
Well, joining us now for more on this and the political reaction across the board is our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who joins us live from Westminster. And Darren, we've heard statements now from the leader of the Labour Party, the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary, and indeed the local MPs.
Yeah, indeed we have, and all pretty much echoing the same message, if you like, Tom, a recognition of the sadness that wants to be expressed by MPs, by leaders, to the family and friends of those who have died, but also thanks to the police as well, and also a message that people should give police time to investigate what has actually gone on here. The Prime Minister, as you say, tweeted this morning that he wanted to thank the police and the emergency services for their ongoing response to what he branded a shocking incident in Nottingham this morning. He said he's been kept up to date with the developments. The police must be given, he says, time to undertake the work. Similar sentiments from the Home Secretary, who also said that she'd spoken to Nottinghamshire's Chief Constable and was also getting regular updates. She said she wanted to thank the emergency services, but she was also shocked and saddened that 3 people have lost their lives, and her thoughts were with those affected by the incidents. And then, as you say, around lunchtime, we got this kind of joint statement, if you like, from the 3 local MPs, not something that normally happens in politics, it must be said, in which they talked about the impact on their city, on Nottingham itself. They said that the city had been devastated by the deaths of 3 people this morning. Our thoughts and prayers are with the families and the loved ones of those who have died and those who were injured. We're grateful for the efforts of the city's emergency responders in tackling these incidents. They must be allowed to investigate and have the time to do so. That Nottingham is a beautiful city, home to brilliant people from all backgrounds. We're shaken by today's events, but we'll meet them collectively as a community and heal together. So the thoughts there across the political spectrum, different politicians echoing the same sentiments. At a time like this, you often do find the politicians of opposite political views tend to come together.
Now, of course, there's always a temptation with regard to events like these to get into the realm of speculation, of motivation and all the rest of it. But it does seem that politicians across the board are being united in saying, let the police do their job. We will learn what goes on as the police make their official announcements.
Yeah, indeed, and I think that leads into what Mark was just talking about there, that there are still so many unanswered questions about what has gone on, what the sequence of events potentially were in Nottingham this morning, what the motivation may well have been. We don't have any of those answers. Politicians don't have any of those answers. Now, I suspect the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary will have a better sense of what's gone on than you, I, or indeed most people across the road there in Parliament, but it is a very, very deliberate and clear message from all politicians, it must be said this afternoon, that they're not, as you say, willing to get into the realms of speculation, that the police should be given the time and space to investigate what precisely has gone on, and that we shall find out in due course what precisely has.
Well, Darren McCaffrey, thank you very much for the very latest there from Westminster. Appreciate your time this afternoon. And of course, there's been so much going on this morning. We've been across so many different elements of this story. We've got reporters live on the ground in Nottingham. We have, of course, been speaking to experts in the field of policing and security as well. For all of the latest news on this developing situation in Nottingham, GB News is the place to be. Just to run you through what precisely we know so far, 3 people dead via stabbing is what we understand. 3 people hospitalised, injured by being hit by a white van. That is what we have learnt so far. A suspect arrested, a number of armed police raids in and around Nottingham as well. This story is fast developing, and we are expecting at some point in this afternoon an official police press conference. We'll bring you the very latest on that as that happens too. But we'll be right back with this developing story and breaking news after the weather.
Afternoon, I'm Alex Deakin and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. More sunshine for the rest of the day, pretty warm as you've probably noticed, but we are seeing some thunderstorms breaking out in the far northwest. High pressure continues to dominate up to the north, but around it the breeze just coming back in from the east once more, so introducing slightly cooler conditions here, but for most, as I said, it's fine, warm and sunny. Small chance of a shower breaking out in the south, but the greatest risk of showers and thunderstorms for the west of Northern Ireland and northwest Scotland. Large hailstones possible here, those storms fading during this evening. Most places becoming dry and clear overnight. But there's that easterly breeze, bringing a cooler feel, a more comfortable night here, whereas in the west, it will be another pretty oppressive night, quite humid, difficult night for sleeping, temperatures staying up in the mid to high teens. Another pretty warm and sunny day to come then on Wednesday. Even lower risk of seeing a shower tomorrow. Still the possibility of one or two, mostly over the highlands of Scotland. Again, some of the coast in the northeast and the southwest may just be a little misty at times, but for the vast majority, blue skies throughout Wednesday. Temperatures just a degree or so down, but still getting into the high 20s across the south. Again, a little more comfortable on the east coast, more likely to be in the low 20s here. But pretty much all parts seeing lots of sunshine during Wednesday. A fine, balmy evening Wednesday evening. Again, just that easterly breeze bringing a slightly cooler feel and perhaps a bit more in the way of mist and low cloud in some spots on Thursday morning. You may wake up slightly grey skies, but that mist and low cloud should melt away pretty rapidly, I suspect, during the day to again reveal plenty of sunshine. Again, the chance of some showers coming into the west and perhaps from Northern Ireland late in the day, but most places just dry, fine, sunny and pretty warm. Not quite as warm as today, but temperatures again getting quite widely into the mid-20s. Goodbye.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute.
kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You're with GB News Live. Now, more on this attack in Nottingham. Let's get to it now. We've got, I believe we can speak to an individual. Charlie Burley is an eyewitness who saw elements of this attack and indeed heard sirens outside his property. And we spoke to him a little bit earlier. This is what he had to say.
I live about 5 minutes down the road from Magdala Road, which is, of course, where we now know one of the bodies was found. I live in Sherwood, which is a very small, tight-knit community, very quiet. About 5:20 this morning, I was awakened by the sound of just an absolute cacophony of sirens. And it lasted for what I would say must be about half an hour. It was just siren after siren, vehicle after vehicle heading down Mansfield Road, which is the main road that connects where I live in Sherwood down to Magdala Road. It's about a 5-minute walk from here. And at that point, I had no idea what was going on, of course, but in that sort of situation, you assume people are heading into the city centre. But the emergency response, of course, was only just down the road from here. And it's such a quiet and peaceful area. It's come as a huge shock to everyone that lives here, all the residents, of course, that live nearby. And yeah, I mean, everyone is shocked and devastated by the news, of course.
So what did you spring out of bed and look out the window? What did you do, Charlie?
Yeah, exactly that. So the first couple of sirens I heard, I thought, okay, that's normal. You kind of expect that. Maybe not on a Monday night. Nottingham is a vibrant student city, but it's more at the weekends you tend to get the emergency vehicles going into town. But it became apparent after that it wasn't just a couple of vehicles. This was dozens of vehicles. And I could see the blue lights flashing through my curtains. I could see the sort of the gap between the flashing lights. Of course, that woke me up. I sat in bed for about 10 minutes just hearing the sirens going off and going off and going off. And I actually messaged my girlfriend at 6 a.m. saying something major must be happening around here because I have never heard an emergency response like this. It was like something else, I've just never heard sirens like it in my life.
Charlie, we're all worrying that maybe this was targeted at students because student land is nearby and sometimes students are, as you say, it's a vibrant student city, busier at the weekends. Are there many student bars in that area?
No, this is the interesting thing about Mapley Park and Magdala Road is it's not. It's a quiet residential area and it's actually out of the city centre. You would have to perhaps make a 10-minute journey out of the city centre via a vehicle to actually get there. So it's not in the city centre itself, which is why, of course, for the residents living around here, it's come as such a shock. But Nottingham, of course, is a massive student city, as you mentioned, and a lot of the routes heading out of the city centre are back to areas that are populated by students. You've got Forest Fields just down the road from here, probably about a 10-minute walk, which is a huge student area. So it is, it's not unusual to see students walking home at 5 a.m. or perhaps getting an e-scooter back. You know, it's very, very common in Nottingham because, as you say, it is a student city. And a lot of these students do go out in the week as well.
Well, that was the voice of Charlie Burley, an eyewitness to what unfolded in the early hours of this morning, saying what he heard and what he saw. Well, let's turn now to some live pictures from Nottingham, where, of course, a 31-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder following the deaths of 3 people and, indeed, the hospitalisation of 3 further individuals. We can just see some forensic officers in the distance of this shot here. Our cameras have been asked to move back away from where some of this forensic investigation has been ongoing within police cordons. Our Home and Security editor, Mark White, was telling us in the last hour, in fact, we saw him being moved back himself as these cordons were expanded. But of course, 3 cordons across the city of Nottingham, one around Magdala Road, one in the centre of Nottingham around Milton Street, and one in Ilkeston Road 2. This on top of several armed police raids, we learn now, on commercial and residential properties. And, of course, the site of the arrest of the suspect, which is yet another site in Nottingham with a significant police presence. It's quite hard to overstate the scale of the police investigation in this instance across many different sites. And as a result of all of these police officers, not just from Nottinghamshire Police, but also from neighbouring police forces now assisting this investigation, we learn. As a result of all of this activity across Nottingham, the tram system has been put on hold today. No trams are running. Indeed, many of the buses are not running either. This is a city that is really reeling from not just the effects of the attack, but also this feels much more like a live event to many of those in Nottingham, especially those who have seen armed police walking down their streets or raiding residential or indeed commercial properties, as we've learnt in recent hours. Well, this is GB News, and again, the more we learn from Nottingham, the more we bring straight to you. But for now, let's get the very latest headlines in the rest of the news with Titania.
Tom, thank you very much and good afternoon. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The first public hearing in the COVID-19 inquiry is underway. The initial stage is focusing on whether the country was properly prepared. A solicitor representing the bereaved families for justice says today marks the end of a 2-year battle. A video sharing the experiences of some of those who suffered most during the pandemic was played to the inquiry.
The most you can hope is to give your loved one a good death. And we will forever carry the guilt that our daddy was denied that.
I'm angry. I need questions answered. I'm just still hurt and I'm still upset.
And the time that he needed me most, I wasn't there. And I felt guilty about that, even though it wasn't my fault.
Homeowners are being warned of further interest rate hikes after the latest data showed wages have risen at their fastest rate on record post-pandemic. It puts more pressure on the Bank of England as it tries to curb inflation. Wages, excluding bonuses, were 7.2% higher in the 3 months to April. Unemployment also unexpectedly fell. A mother and her partner have been convicted over the death of a 9-year-old boy. Alfie Steele had 50 injuries on his body and was found submerged in a bath at their home in Droitwich in Worcestershire. Carla Scott was found guilty of manslaughter and Dirk Howell was convicted of his murder. Former US President Donald Trump will appear in court today in Miami, Florida. Mr. Trump faces 37 charges of mishandling classified documents and is accused of unlawfully keeping US national security material. He's the first current or former president to face criminal charges. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2590 and 1.1650 euros. The price of gold is £1,559 and 67 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,594 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Well, let's head back to Nottingham now and speak to GB News reporter Jack Carson, who has been closely following the very latest developments on the ground. Jack, just remind us precisely where are you in Nottingham?
So, Tom, good afternoon. This is Ilkeston Road. This is where at around 4 a.m. police say 2 people were found here on the on the road. In fact, we've had an update from the police just 4 minutes ago, a statement from Nottinghamshire Police that says that they're keeping an open mind over the motive of the city attack, which of course we know has left 3 people dead. At this time, they believe that there is no one else outstanding in connection with the incidents. They were called to this road, as I mentioned, at 4 a.m. after 2 people had been killed, and then called to other incidents around the city. 1 man is in hospital in a critical condition, while 2 others are believed to have suffered only minor injuries. We know that the police have arrested a 31-year-old man. I was there at the place of the arrest earlier, where we saw that van with dented bonnet and cracked windscreen. Police believed to have tasered that man during the arrest, and obviously then arresting him. A number of major roads in the city centre have been closed. The tram networks, the public transport has stopped, and of course police diverting people and of course transport into other areas. Of course, behind me here on Ilkeston Road, we've seen in the last few minutes some forensic teams that they're going around. They're dusting things like the bus stop, they're dusting parts of the road. They're looking of course at some of the debris that still sits across the road from those incidents earlier on in the early hours of this morning. So investigations, well, very active here as forensic teams start to search the area and collect that evidence.
Well, Jack, it's interesting to hear this statement that the police are keeping an open mind as to the motivation behind this attack. Earlier, we had sort of been steered away from the idea that this may be terror-related. I suppose this fresh statement might well put that particular idea back on the table, having all options there on the table, whether it's gang-related, whether it's drug-related, whether it's terror-related, whether it's a random act of violence, or indeed to do with the mental health of the individual concerned. I suppose what might be a crumb of comfort to those living in Nottingham is that the police are expecting this is just a lone individual, a lone wolf, who has now been detained. What do you get the sense on the ground there of the mood of the people of Nottingham with this enormous imposition on their city, the eyes of the nation upon them?
Incident, and there are several parts to it.
Yeah, a lot of people shocked about the scale, really, of this incident. A lot of people just, saying to me, unbelievable, that they can't quite believe that all of this has happened right on their doorstep. Of course, Nottingham is very much also a student city. There's 2 universities within this city here, and as you mentioned, police keeping saying they're keeping an open mind about this. Here on Ilkeston Road, further up the road in front of me, we've had a number of police raids as well, going of course to known addresses of this man that they have arrested. Of course they are. It is comforting for the residents of Nottingham that the police believe that this is the only person that is involved in this attack. The fact that they've said that they are not actively looking for anyone else involved in connection with this attack is good news for the people of Nottingham. That their streets are safer, and there isn't of course somebody else, and the police don't currently believe of course that there is another attack planned. But of course this investigation is so active, it's so ongoing. We are constantly getting new information, constantly being updated, constantly seeing new parts of this investigation take place. As I mentioned, the forensic teams behind me actively now searching this area where those 2 people were found dead at 4 a.m. this morning.
And indeed, the idea that there is one further critical condition of an individual in hospital, that's suppose that is new information as well that we've learned from the police, that 2 of those who have reportedly been hit by that van suffered more minor injuries, but 1 is in a far more critical condition as we speak in hospital.
Many of the major roads through the city.
Yeah, that's right. So, of course, we know that there were multiple people that were hit by a van in the city centre earlier. The news, of course, that one man remains in hospital in critical condition. The other 2 to have suffered minor injuries, means that that one man in critical condition, it is now a fight for his life, isn't it? If you're in critical condition in hospital, that's of course so serious that of course that man is fighting for his life. And of course the Chief Constable Kate Maynell of Nottinghamshire Police saying that their thoughts, of course, with the families affected by this shocking incident, and that they're of course working extremely hard to understand exactly what has happened, that the investigations are in the early stages, and of course they are working alongside, they say, counter-terrorism policing to establish the facts as they would normally do in these circumstances.
That is significant. The first time we've heard the police officially use the words working alongside counter-terrorism police. That is a significant development there. Just to recap from that statement that Jack Carson has been bringing us, the police now keeping an open mind as to the motivation of this attack, keeping all options on the table in terms of what might have motivated this individual, although emphasising that it is an individual, a lone wolf. They are not looking for other perpetrators of this crime. And we learned that one individual is in a critical condition in hospital, while two of those individuals, of the three who were reportedly hit by that van, two suffered more minor injuries, one in critical condition in hospital. Well, Jack Carson, thank you so much for bringing us those latest updates. Really, really interesting stuff there. And we'll be back to you, of course, as there are any more developments in this fast-moving story. Well, now some breaking, if unrelated, news. Two police officers who followed two teenage boys on an electric bicycle shortly before it crashed, killing them both, have both been served with gross misconduct notices. That's according to the police watchdog. The deaths prompted riots in the city and widespread criticism of the police, who initially denied that the boys had been followed. Well, we're going to leave that story as it stands. As I say, that was breaking news on that police chase electric bike crash that we heard about last month. But of course, we should return to the story at hand, what is going on in Nottingham today. Another story to do with police, of course, but one perhaps that casts the police in a slightly more positive light. Of course, we've seen this investigation be rapidly unfolding throughout this morning and afternoon across the city of Nottingham, with many different police forces now involved, and this latest news that we've just heard, that the police are working with counter-terrorism officers now. A very significant new line that has just broken in the last few minutes. Well, let's discuss this all further now with the former Detective Chief Inspector at the Metropolitan Police, Perry Benton. And Perry, I want to start with this new line that we've learnt, that counter-terrorism officers are involved in this operation. That's not to say that this was a terrorist attack, but it's to say that the police are keeping their options open. What do you make of it?
So first off, I'd like to convey my condolences to the family and friends affected by this tragic incident. It is right that the police will keep an open mind, as they have to do for any sort of major investigation. It is far too early to kind of speculate on the motives behind the attacks. And obviously they'll be looking at the evidence linking the three different attacks to see what evidence there is to say that they are all connected, and obviously that the individual that's been arrested is the person that's committed all three attacks. The counter-terrorism side of the investigation is obviously a new development, and it is something that the police will do almost as a matter of course. They will be looking at the evidence. I'm confident that my colleagues in Nottinghamshire have already got a lot of information, a lot of evidence. There's a lot of eyewitnesses to the attacks. And the counter-terrorism side of the investigation will obviously sit alongside. Obviously, if the evidence does show it is counter-terrorism related, then our colleagues from sort of counter-terrorism will take over in due course. But it is right that they'll keep an open mind. They'll look at, obviously, the motive. They'll be looking at all the different potential hypotheses that may have obviously been the result of why this has happened and how they're all been connected.
This is such a curious case, of course, because it does have so many hallmarks of terror attacks that we have seen in the past, whether it's using a van or a vehicle as a sort of battering ram to mow down individuals, or indeed in parallel the stabbings that have taken place, those 3 deaths that we learn are a result of stabbings in the streets of Nottingham as well. Both of those two different forms of attack do have the hallmarks of terror-related events that we have seen, not just in this country, but also in Europe, in mainland Europe recently. But then we get the timing of this attack, 4 a.m. That raises eyebrows. That makes it a very curious case that perhaps is not immediately obviously terroristic.
That's what I would like to urge, in that the timing at 4 a.m. in the morning is not typical of a terrorist attack. Normally, they would look at high populated areas, sort of daytime, where they can attack more targets. Certainly from the information I've read around the vehicle attack, it's not evidently clear initially whether they are intended targets or whether the driver had lost control, was being chased by police or chased by other people, and what actually had occurred with the 3 people that were injured by the vehicle. So that's why I think, as I say, the police will keep an open mind. It's encouraging that the police have already conducted raids, because that is certainly something that I would advocate. They'll be looking at the person arrested, looking at who he's connected with, looking at associates, looking at family, and seeing who else may also be involved. I appreciate the police have said that they're not looking for anybody else, but there may be others that have assisted an offender or provided assistance in other ways. So they'll be looking at all sorts of investigative tools, from social media, from telephone data, trying to build up the biggest picture of the persons who's been arrested movements before the incident and obviously during the incident. And that's going to be key, and that's what they're going to be focusing on, as well as obviously obtaining as many eyewitnesses' accounts as possible.
I suppose it is significant that this is assumed to be a lone wolf attacker by the police. This is a pattern that we're seeing more and more regularly in both terror-related cases, but also just sort of common or garden crime, that individuals rather than syndicates, that lone wolf attackers rather than terror cells, if you like, are sort of the modern form of this kind of attack. I suppose that speaks to our security services being fairly good at cracking the more complex conspiracies that go on in this country, and sort of it's only down left to the lone wolf individuals to sort of slip through the net.
We have some of the best counter-terrorism officers in the world. They are constantly, every day, thwarting attacks throughout the UK and also worldwide, and they deserve high praise. And a lot of the incidents that they ever deal with will never become public knowledge. So they deserve a lot of praise, and they are some of the best officers. I think, like I say, it's very early to speculate on the motive. What will be looked at is the connection between the 3 deceased, you know, the 2, obviously, the male and female, and then the other male. What is the connection? Is it terror-related? Is it, someone with mental health issues? Is it drugs? Is it gang-related? So all of those sort of hypotheses will be being considered by the SIO and obviously the senior leadership team of Nottinghamshire Police. And obviously they just need a bit of time to sort of try and piece together, which I'm confident they probably know a lot of information and that they will be able to give that information in due course. But they seem to be doing a fantastic job at the moment. I know that you mentioned there's a lot of other forces involved, which is excellent. So there'll be a lot of cross-border work in there. But they will be working throughout the day, throughout the night, you know, confidently trying to piece together as much evidence as possible to try and build a picture of exactly why this has happened.
Well, Perry Benson, former Detective Chief Inspector at the Metropolitan Police, really appreciate your time this afternoon and your expertise on what is unfolding in a serious incident in Nottingham. Well, let's speak now to the former Met Senior Investigating Officer, Peter Kirkham, for more on the investigations side of this. And Peter, we have seen investigation teams, forensic teams on the sites, but we have also seen, as we've been discussing, some raids of households and at least one commercial property as well. Is this investigation running as you would expect?
It is, very much so. I think the key to this, I would expect, will be the links between the victims. Who are they? Do they know each other? Are they linked to the suspect in some way? As has been mentioned, the timing of this is odd for a terrorist incident. It may well be. All sorts of things happen. But it does seem odd, and the location as well, sort of suburban Nottingham, for two of them and Central Nottingham for the other. Not exactly sort of the highest profile sort of targets that we've seen terrorist attack in the past. So I'd be looking at other motivations, and I think the links between the victims and the suspect are going to be the key factor there, rather than anything I'm going to be finding from the scene. Although, obviously, the scenes all need to be examined by forensic officers. All the evidence needs to be obtained. But I wouldn't be looking to those for the answer to the problem, if you see what I mean.
Now, of course, our cameras are across Nottingham. We've been looking at these police cordons. We've been looking at some of these forensic officers dressed head to toe in their white forensic suits as they carry out their work. Can you give us an insight into what we can't see, into what's going on within Nottinghamshire Police, perhaps behind closed doors? I imagine much questioning of the suspect that they have in custody.
There will be questioning of the suspect, but of course the suspect has the right to silence, and so they may not be saying very much at all. They may be considered unfit for interview, so the police may not have been able to actually interview them at all yet. So there may be a full account provided by a suspect, or there may be nothing at all, or something in between the two. What will be going on behind the scene is intelligence gathering, is research in the background of the suspect, research in the background of all the victims, research in the van. Where has it been? Who does it belong to? What's it used for? Is it stolen? Where was it stolen from? So all of those sorts of intelligence gathering parts of the investigation will be going on behind the scenes, as will the early stages of gathering CCTV. What the police will be keen to do is, if they start from the presumption that these three incidents are linked, and I think that's a reasonable presumption, they'll be looking at where the van was between and before and after those incidents, and trying to put together a full picture of exactly what's happened this morning, and where that van originated, and trying to work back from the earliest scene, seeing if they can track it back on CCTV at all to see where it came from. So there'll be a lot of things going on that aren't so visible, and they're probably going to be the things that give them the answers.
Just to wrap this conversation up, when would you expect we get some preliminary outcomes from this investigation? There's been talk of a press conference later this afternoon, although we don't have a specific time. When might we get some sort of results, some sort of publication of information?
I think the question of when the information is released to the public is different from when the police will have the answers themselves. I suspect they've got an awful lot of the answers already. It doesn't take very long to do the sort of initial higher level research of someone from a name or an address or a vehicle details. And so they'll have quite a lot of information already, and they may well have come to a conclusion of the most likely motivation or such like, because it could be domestic related, it could be a disgruntled ex-employee taking some sort of revenge on people connected with a company. It could be any number of things, as well as the obvious one that we immediately think of with something like this, which is terrorism. Ironically, the use of a vehicle to mow people down in terrorist incidents actually seems to have sort of led to the vehicles being used in that way in other incidents. It wasn't something that was commonplace before.
Well,
so,
Peter, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave this conversation here because we're running up to the end of the hour. But it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you, and I appreciate your time this afternoon. And indeed, with that, that is it from me on GB News Live this afternoon. Coming up next, Patrick Christys will be taking you through far more of this extensive investigation and indeed what we learn, and perhaps this elusive press conference too. Just to repeat, 3 dead, 3 hospitalised and an unprecedented attack in Nottingham. All of that coming up with Patrick Christys next.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed